Welcome to the Crime Dawg Podcast with your host and content creator, Johnny FIORICA, whose hot sauce may be better than Nick Tahoe's. Ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Crime Dawg Podcast. I'm your host, content creator, Johnny FIORICA, 30-year veteran with the Rochester Police Department, recently retired detective, along with my trusted co-host, first one on deck, David Simpson. David was a legendary street cop, SWAT team member, worked undercover in our drug unit, finished out his career in the RPD homicide unit. Dave, welcome to the pod.
Happy to be here, boys.
Next up, that was Jason's proverbial. Last week you didn't get the golf clap, Dave.
No, I didn't.
I did not clap from last week.
Yeah, he was mad at you. He was mad at you prior to us hitting the button live.
We talked it out.
That golf clapper, Jason Blanchard, 2.5-decade veteran, Rochester Police Department. He worked east and west side of the city. Worked Genesee, he worked Clinton, he worked Lake, worked all over the Rock. He's also the godfather of the current Goodman 3rd Platoon. And he's also the lead RPD hostage negotiator currently. Jason, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me, Johnny. David, thanks for the clap.
First one.
We got a good one for you today, folks. Guys, we got a hot burner one. We got RPD Rochester, New York, homicide captain Frank Umbrino. David, you and I interviewed the captain a couple months ago. It's just going to be an audio only. There's no video. But, man, the content of this, you being a former homicide detective, the content of this audio is really good. I'm not trying to overhype it, but, man, it's a good interview.
Yeah, Frank's a great interview. He's never seen a microphone he didn't love, and it loves him back. I worked for Frank for a number of years in the homicide unit. He was also a big-time mentor along with yourself and teaching me the ways of the Jedi, so to speak, on how to be a street cop. So it was a fun interview, and he's going to have some great content for sure.
Yeah, he was my former street cop partner when my uniform pants used to fit me and I didn't have to jump off my garage roof to get into them. He was we went undercover together after we worked the streets, went our separate ways because he became a boss. I became a detective. But Jay, you worked with Captain Umbrino through numerous parts of your career. What are your thoughts on listening to that pod that we have with Frank?
I think it's great intel, great information, from a guy who's been there and done it, right? Worked all over the city of Rochester, worked with you in Clinton section. And I like to torment both of you guys with saying that, Frank made your career. And then I tell Frank that Johnny made his career. So, you guys are both great street cops, but yeah, great intel from Frank, great information. And David, you are correct. Frank has never seen a microphone or a camera that he does not like.
That's why the community loves him. I mean, during several points during some of his press conferences, he had a hell of a Twitter following. But man, he was a great interview, guys. I can't wait to share this with everybody. We hope you like it. If you like it, hit subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and we hope you enjoy it. Have a good one. Welcome back, Crime Dawg Podcast. Our special guest today, Captain Frank Umbrino from the Rochester Police Department. Captain Umbrino, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I don't think you've ever called me captain before.
I haven't. That'll be the last time.
I'm kind of shocked by that.
I know. I was trying to be polite.
That was very professional.
I was trying to be professional. So, Frank, welcome to the show. In past episodes, what we do is we like to give our listeners we and David say all 10 of them. We like to have our guests give a little intro. We know who you are, what you are now, but we want to kind of walk you back to how it all started to where you are today. So for our audience, why don't you just give them a little background on yourself?
Sure. I currently work for the Rochester Police Department. I'm a captain in the homicide unit. I started my law enforcement career over 30 years ago. I started as a police dispatcher in the town of Greece. Got hired by the Sheriff's Department, worked part-time for about 6 months at the airport. Then I got hired full-time with the city in 1992. Worked Clinton section, Maple section, spent most of my career as a patrolman in Clinton section. I had a shitty partner back then, but somehow I made it through. After working Clinton section, I went up to the Vice Squad. I worked undercover for a bunch of years. Then I started to get promoted. I got promoted to sergeant, went back on the road, ended up back in the Vice Squad, got promoted again, ended up going out to the tactical unit for a little while. Went up to homicide as lieutenant, stayed there for a bunch of years. I got promoted to captain, went to staff duty officer, and after about 6 months, I went back up to homicide. So I've been in homicide for about the last 10 years or so, 11 years. But prior to that, my entire career was spent on the road or undercover, working Clinton section for the majority of the time. It's been a great career.
Yeah. So the shitty partner that he was talking about, David, obvious that was me.
Yes.
For our viewing audience at home and our listening audience who don't want to look at our faces. Yeah, that was me. But here, so Frank, we had a cool guest on last time. His name was Mike Kern. He was the acting second in charge of New York State currently, but he's the head of the Rochester, New York field office for ATF. Literally, if we could have both of you on together, it would have been a great cross-pollination section because Mike got into...
Big word.
That was impressive.
Not quite sure what it means, but that was a big word.
You got a lot smarter in retirement.
You think so?
That was really good.
So there was cross-pollination with you and Mike because we talked a lot about guns. We talked a lot about guns, how they get here, what they do, our source states. We talked about Georgia. We talked about Ohio. We talked about Mississippi, Kentucky, all these crazy places that are bringing guns into our city, which then we talk about you. We talk about you, your unit, what your unit does, all the good work. I mean, I worked really close with you and your men and women in that unit for a long time with my affiliation with the Violent Crime Task Force and ATF. Guns, if we look at the stats, which I'll reiterate them, almost around 70%-ish of your crimes, your homicide, your murders are guns.
Yes. And it's probably always been that type of breakdown, but just the amount of homicides and the amount of violence and the amount of guns used in a singular incident. We'll have one homicide where there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, even 8, 9 guns used in one shooting incident, if you will.
Right.
It's just guns are way more prevalent. You remember back in the day, we'd make a gun arrest once a week. It was a big thing, right? Maybe twice a week. And now it's almost every car that you stop, they're getting guns out of.
It's funny that you said that because you said that last time, right?
We talked about it. You said if you go in a week and in your rotation and you grab a gun, that's a good week. You got one gun, you get 2 guns, that's an unbelievable week. Now, like the captain said, every time you stop a car, there's guns in the car. So it's just way more prevalent.
We had our Pennsylvania Avenue homicide a couple of years ago, and there was, I think, 15 or 16 different guns that were used in that incident. And that's just unheard of.
Right. That was one of the mass shootings, right?
Yep.
And one thing I should say to start this podcast, I know you were partners with Frank, but he was also my supervisor for the last
please don't remind
5 years that I was, 6 years that I was.
How many times did I fire you?
Listen, you didn't ever fire me. We had it was like a ballet dance. It was a symbiotic relationship we had. You let me be me and I let you be you. We fit perfectly in.
So hang on. I use cross-pollination. You use symbiotic.
Listen, I went to McQuaid.
I'll just say it like this. Dave was a pain in the ass.
I didn't go to city schools like you two morons.
Oh, no.
What's that, the city school?
No. Oh, oh man. Here comes, by the way, the AQ.
I'm an AQ grad. Thank you very much.
Charlotte South. Go Knights.
So, we talked about the guns and everything like that. 2021 was the most murders that this area has seen in the history of the department. And you talk about, was it 85 that you guys had?
Yep. 85. And just to put that in perspective, we would average 35, 40, maybe 50 in a bad year. And the only reason that it was only 85 is because of the outstanding medical care here in the city of Rochester,
right?
University of Rochester Medical Center. That number could very well be over 100 easily.
Right.
And it was a crazy year, and it was a big strain on the unit. And, our number of investigators never went up. It kind of stayed consistent. And, what people don't understand, about murder investigations today, as opposed to maybe, even 10 years ago, is the amount of time that goes into each investigation because of the technology that's out there.
Right.
Video's great, but it takes forever to collect, review. The amount of man hours that goes into an investigation today is just so much greater than it was in the past.
Yeah, we talked about that in the last episode. We dove into so many of these shootings that happen. They're literally inches away from your men and women in your unit getting called, right?
Oh, yeah.
So what it comes down to is, yeah, you do all murders pretty much, I know you guys do some other things, but pretty much your unit, I know you guys have other things that you do, but I'm just talking about murders tonight. You guys are literally inches sometimes away. Hundreds of shootings we have a year, hundreds of shootings.
Yeah. And that's just people shot. And the number gets even greater when you talk about the number of, reckless endangerments or prohibited uses where they're just shooting guns, aimlessly down the street.
Right.
And for those that are listening, when you don't have a murder and there's a shooting or there's a serious physical injury with a shooting, section level investigators would handle that, correct?
Correct. The way it works, basically, if, I say just an assault shooting, it's never just an assault shooting.
Right.
There's a victim behind it. But for all assault shootings, the section will handle it. And my unit only comes in if, the person has died, or sometimes if death is imminent, depending on the medical prognosis, we'll jump on it a little bit early.
Yeah, so that's what we talk about all the time. We think about, I remember when I was on the job, I would wake up, as you both did, so it was just me, but we woke up to emails every single day. We woke up to emails from PSI or CSI, whatever they're called now, but the field investigators. We wake up and it's like multiple emails of people getting shot.
Well, there's a lot of frustrating things, but what people don't understand is, okay, we had, 300 and some odd people shot last year or the year before. That's 300 people. You don't know the extent of those injuries. A lot of those are life-altering injuries. We always talk about homicides because that's the number that everybody looks at. But, I could tell you instances for people that get, their life gets altered forever because they're paralyzed or they only have use of partial use of their limbs.
Yeah.
And we forget about those victims, and we should not.
I guess my question when you say that is, over the last 5 to 6 years, with the rise in shootings, it's not because Glock and Smith & Wesson decided to manufacture more guns. So
No.
I'll throw you the softball pitch here, and what do you attribute the rise in people carrying guns to, and the fact that they're using them, and we have such high numbers now? What is there one thing? Is there a couple things based on your expertise? Where do you think this stems from?
Certainly not one factor stands alone that is the cause of it, right? There's a multitude of factors. One big factor is people carry guns today because they're not afraid that they're going to get stopped by the police, right? Johnny, when we would break roll call from Clinton section, what's the first thing that we would do?
Jump in the car, go right down the avenue.
We'd go right down the avenue and we'd start shagging everybody off the corner, right? Hey, it's 3:30, boys. Time to get off the corner. So we didn't have the shootings, the drive-by shootings back then of the people standing on the street corner where 3, 4, 5, 6 people get shot because we were getting rid of them.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's several reasons why cops today can't partake in the type of proactive policing that we did back then. There's no fear from the bad guys that they're going to get caught carrying a gun because they know they're not going to get stopped. They know if they're standing on the street corner, the cops aren't going to jump out on them and shag them. They know that if they're driving a car, they're probably not going to get pulled over. You couple that with the fact that if they do get caught with the gun, they're going to get out the next day. There's no repercussions to them getting caught with the gun. So that's why back in the day, one gun arrest a week was a big feat.
Right. So basically getting caught with a gun is the equivalent of the old days where you get caught with a few bags of weed and you go downtown and you get let right out.
We got
it's the same thing with a gun.
Story of guys getting caught with guns 2, 3, 4, 5 times in a year, and they're getting let out right off the bat.
And your Judge Lopez and Judge Lee and these people feel...
There are city court judges, and I can't sit here and name them like you can because I still am employed, but they just let them out time and time again. And everybody wants to blame bail reform, and it's a huge part of it, but there still is judicial discretion that does not get, the judges don't take advantage of their discretion.
Now, no one in major media in town has ever asked this, but has anyone ever had a conversation with these judges that consistently are known to let them out? Or is it just known that they're just going to operate like this?
No, there's people that have spoken to them. And, recently here in Rochester, we've started publicizing information on who's getting arrested and who's getting let out. Now, all this information is available to the public if they click onto the right website, and the judges have complained about it. Certain judges have complained. And it's like, if these are the decisions you're going to make, then live by them.
Right.
Stand by them.
And if they voiced any stance on why they...
Oh, they got pissed. They've gotten pissed that they're getting, I guess, outed, if you will. Again, these are your decisions. You're making them. be proud of them. You're doing it for a reason, so stand behind
Right,
it.
you're a city court judge and you're letting people out that get caught with illegal handguns to go shoot and make
Murderers.
kill.
We've had murderers that have gotten let out
Right.
on ridiculously low bails.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's what we were talking about, right? We talked about a lot of things there. So let's just digest a couple things. So at the end of the day, we'll talk about a little about bail reform. But when we all work the streets together, we talk about order maintenance crimes. Order maintenance crimes are, hey, get off the corner, hey, shag you from a corner. We disperse them from a corner. If they showed back up, it was either a disorderly conduct or a loitering arrest if you found some drugs on them or in and around the area. That is the intangible. The order maintenance is the intangible. What I mean by that is, and you talked about it, and this is what you're hitting on, is you never know how many lives we ended up saving by getting these guys off the corner.
By clearing corners.
By clearing corners and getting them off the street.
And just so people understand, it's not like we're jumping out of the car and saying, hey, get off the corner, right? This is my corner. No, that's not the way that it worked. We'd get out of the car, we'd shoot the shit with them for a little bit, got to know them all, right? And there's a certain amount of respect that you
earn.
You earn,
yeah.
Right? So there's a right way to do proactive policing,
right?
Order maintenance type of stuff, and that's what we used to do, and that's what's lacking today. And I don't blame the cops on the road; they can't. Today, cop wants to do some order maintenance. He gets out, tells guys to get off the corner, comes back in 10 minutes. They're still there. He gets out of the car. Now, God forbid he's involved in an interaction with that guy.
Right.
There's nothing that the cop can do. He's wrong. No matter what he does, he's wrong. Right. The guy starts fighting with them.
And he's certainly not supported when he has to put hands on somebody to get that respect that we were able to earn to get people to move along so we didn't have to do that in the future. One of the old-timer cops told me when I came on, he said, it's easier to come off hard and go easy than it is to be easy and go hard. So, and that's, once you try to clear a corner and tell someone to move along and they call your bluff, so to speak, then what? So that's where we're at now, is the then what?
Well, and couple it even, escalate that even a little bit more. God forbid you end up getting in a shooting from clearing a corner or performing a traffic stop. One analogy I like to give people that aren't in the police world, I see a car. I know that there's 3 guys in that car, and I know that there's 3 guns, whether it be because they were just on social media flashing the guns, whatever. I know there's 3 guns in that car. I pull that car over, 50-50 shot I get in a shooting, right?
Correct.
What are the odds that I'm going to get the support from who I need to get the support from if I get in that shooting? My family's going to get destroyed in the media. My life's going to get turned upside down because people are going to come up with all types of crazy stuff.
Right.
So I have to make the decision, do I turn left or do I turn right, follow the car to make the traffic stop? Back in the day, it wasn't a question for us, right?
None.
We weren't afraid of the public outcry or getting shot, however you want to word it. We weren't afraid to do it. Not that these guys are afraid of getting shot today because they're out there to do a job. They're afraid of what's going to happen to their families, God forbid, if they get into a shooting.
And they're afraid of city council coming down them or jumping on social media and blasting them and calling for body-worn cameras within 8 hours of a shooting. That's what they're worried about.
And you got a family. You got 2-3 kids.
Right.
You want to put your family through all that? That's a decision.
Or do you turn left and go get a coffee and...
Man, I knew this was going to be a good episode. What I want to get into is I want to talk about your average age of a murder victim is right around 27. And an interesting thing that you and I spoke about off camera was sometimes that 27 is really not 27 because some of your suspect or victims are, or your suspects and victims are lower in age and juveniles, right?
Yeah. Well, what I can tell you is in the last 3 years, we've averaged homicide suspects and victims. We've averaged 13, and I think so far this year we're already at like 14 homicide victims and suspects that were under 18 years of age.
There you go.
Wow.
So you compare that to the 3 years prior, starting, going back from 2020, 19, 18, we would average 5, 4, and 8 in those 3 years.
Right.
So our victims and our suspects have gotten younger and younger over the last 3 years.
They gotten younger and younger, and they're carrying guns.
Yep.
Because the accessibility of the guns is just so. Let's talk about legal versus illegal for a second. And we did a little bit before, but let's talk about it with you for a minute. So you've been in the unit. You talked about 10, 11 years as a lieutenant, as a captain. you've done this for over a 30-year career, worked in a murder squad, and here we are. It depends on what station you put it on and how bad guns are. Obviously, David and I are 2A guys, but at the end of the day, why don't you touch a little bit about legal versus illegal?
So what I can tell you for fact is I've been up there 11 or 12 years, had, I don't know how many murders,
Couple hundred?
No, probably just shy of 1,000, I bet you.
Wow.
Out of those murders in the last 11 years, there's maybe 3 or 4 that have been committed with legally owned handguns. So let me reiterate that. Out of 800-900 murders in the city of Rochester, there's been maybe 3 or 4 that have been committed with legal handguns. And I'll compound on that a little bit. Only one that wasn't a domestic related incident. And the first one I've ever had with a legally owned handgun that wasn't a domestic related incident was either last year or the year before.
Right.
So basically, legal gun owners aren't committing homicides in the city of Rochester.
No.
And I think
that's not even arguable. I mean,
right. I think
Stat driven, right?
I think you could take that and throw a blanket over nationally.
Yes.
That's exactly
Rochester's no different than any other mid-sized city throughout.
Right, but that needs to be put out there because you have these politicians that are talking and bullshit about how legal gun owners need to be further crimped in their ability to carry a gun. But I will say it again, that legal gun owners are not committing
That's because they're afraid to say what the real problems are, Dave. That's why they want to latch onto something easy, and that's an easy argument for them to make. They're afraid to say what the real problems are of what's driving the increase in shootings and murders.
So my question to you would be, what are the things that are driving the murders in the city of Rochester?
Well, lack of morals, lack of family structure, and you couple that with a terrible education system and bail reform and raise the age, parole reform. Again, like we said earlier in the episode, there's not one thing you can put your finger on. In the last 3 years, it's been the perfect storm. All those have come into play.
You took my words right out of my mouth. I said
we have actually smarter than you, as I have been for a long time.
Raf, what's a raf?
Yeah, you better.
So we talk about this, the family dynamic, and I could speak, when we all grew up, and I think that we have the profession that we did, and it was an honorable profession, and the extensive background check that we did, it was because of our parents. It was because of our upbringing, the way we were raised, that we didn't get into things that we may have gotten into, right? And we didn't get tempted to get into things that we may have wanted to get into as a young kid or as an adolescent or even as a young adult, because in the back of your head, you're like, mom and dad are going to beat the shit out of me when I go home. And the thing is I think that's a huge thing. And I think what we want to talk about is the uncomfortable elephant in the room is things like violent crime happened because in some instances, no, because there's some crimes that people come from great families and multi-gajillionaires, and it's got nothing to do with social economic. It's all about the family structure. I'll tell you why, because I've seen some fantastic families in the 30 years that I patrolled the city streets in Rochester, in New York, and they weren't having their kids out past 5, out past 6, out past 7. So there's a lot of great families that live in our communities all over the nation. But it's those ones with the broken down family dynamic that we run into issues with, that we run into problems with. They're either our victim or our suspects.
Yeah, 100%. Unfortunately, there's too many kids today that don't have anybody that they're afraid to disappoint, right? We didn't screw up when we were a kid because we didn't want to disappoint our parents.
Mm-hmm.
And you take that out of it, and you got a recipe for disaster. There's no structure at home. And listen, we worked in the gut forever, right?
Yeah.
And we certainly, in fact, when we were working the streets and in the gut, most families, whether it's mom or grandma, there was a family figure in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And we would bring a kid home that screwed up and did something wrong, and mom or grandma or dad would be pissed at the kid, not pissed at the cops.
Right.
And today we're missing that. There's just a lack of family structure. And one of the most heartbreaking things for me in my position is when we get these 14, 15, 16-year-old kids in the box, and you're paying attention to these kids, and you're like, man, this ain't a bad kid. This
Yeah.
kid's got potential. It's just he needs somebody to talk to.
Yeah.
He needs somebody to guide him into the right direction. And unfortunately, by the time they get to my investigators, it's too late, right? They've already screwed up and killed somebody. And it breaks my heart to see these kids making the decisions that they're making that are affecting the rest of their lives. And, that's the worst part of the job, is seeing, not only the victim's life ruined and the victim's family being destroyed, but the suspect. In a lot of cases with these kids, it's like, shit, if somebody would have gotten to this kid beforehand,
Right.
we wouldn't be sitting here today.
I'll tell you right now, and I'm going to have our producer, Danny, mark it. Right at that point where Captain Umbrino's talking, we're going to insert this greatest quote, and I see it all over Instagram, with Denzel Washington. And he talks about, where was the father with this kid when he was 6? Where was the family dynamic? Denzel Washington, phenomenal multi-Oscar Academy Award-winning actor, talking about how clutch the family dynamic is raising a kid, and how once they get to that point, it's too late.
It's too late.
I was in Chicago a couple of 3-4 weeks ago, and we saw these little kids on bikes with masks on the side of their head, like 5 or 6 of them. And the driver said, yeah, they're little yummies. I said, who? He said, little yummies. Look up, Google Little Yummy. Little Yummy was an 11-year-old murderer.
Wow.
And you look at his picture, you'll see the headshot of him, and he's like this. And he got murdered at 11 by a 14-year-old.
Wow.
Who's doing life now, and a 16-year-old.
That makes no sense.
You blame the system? Where was his father? It starts in the house. It starts in the home. And well, my father got locked up. Well, where was his father?
Yeah.
It's too late. And back to what you said earlier, Dave, the politicians want to blame the guns because they're too afraid to blame the lack of family structure, which is the cause. I don't care how, it's an insult to poor people to say, he did it because he's poor. He did it because he doesn't have opportunity. Because there's a shit ton of poor people out there who have risen up and become successful, productive citizens.
Sure.
So don't insult the poor people and blame it on their situation. That's crap.
Right.
And just for those that are listening, when the captain refers to the box, that's the interview room. So it's a slang that we
And the
use.
gut?
So, and the gut would be
Inner city?
the inner city part. Well, the
rougher-
inner city,
The rougher parts.
the rougher parts that some cops don't want to go in.
The gut. We have our own terminology. Right?
Right.
I tell everybody, if you take a look at some of our vernacular, it's like, you have the street vernacular that they use, the cops use their own vernacular, their own lingo, and those are two right there. We just educated you. The box is the interview room, and the gut is what we refer to as the toughest area to work in any city.
The lights are all out.
Right.
But I will say, working in the gut, I also met some of the best people that I've ever met
Sure.
in my life or in my career in the gut.
Right. Go ahead.
So, and I don't know if you want to hit on this now, but one thing that I don't want to lose in this is that you mentioned the age factor. And that's something that I want to learn about, because that happened kind of post when I retired. So I'd like to know your opinions on how certain policies and legislation has impacted the age of those that are committing these violent crimes and or carrying illegal handguns.
So your 14, 15, 16-year-old of today is not the 14, 15, 16-year-old of even 10 years ago. Okay? It's just, and for the average mom or dad sitting at home, they're like, oh my God, my 14, 15, 16, that's not what we're dealing with in the segment that we're talking about here. Everybody screws up when they're a kid, right? We've all done stupid things when we were a kid. And how did we make sure that it didn't escalate or happen again, right? We got in trouble, whether we got grounded, we got sent to our room, we got
Sports taken away, whatever.
Right. So today, nothing happens to these kids. Nothing at all. I have a very tragic case I can't get into a lot of details in, but there was a young woman who ended up dying, and I got to be careful with my words here. What we learned afterwards from very good friends of hers is that she had gotten caught multiple times in stolen cars with guns, and her friends were actually trying to say, hey, you need to stop. And her words to them were, why? It's fun. Nothing happened. Nothing will happen when I get caught. I've already been caught 2-3 times. There's no reason to stop doing it.
Right.
And that was one of the most heartbreaking cases to me because, once she got caught in that stolen car the first time or the second time, if something happened to her, if she was inconvenienced or anything, then it may have deterred her from making the decisions she made later on that ultimately cost her life. And that just happens time and time again. And when you don't nip it in the bud, and I think I said it right, I always say that wrong, you don't nip it in the bud, it's going to escalate. And they may start out stealing a candy bar. Then it's going to go to stealing cars. Then it's going to go to carjackings. And eventually they're going to end up shooting somebody during a carjacking, and now they're done because we didn't take it. I can't tell you how many, and I'm sorry, Dave, but I can't tell you how many juvenile murder suspects we've had this year that have prior stolen car arrests, prior gun arrests. And I'm not talking 1, 2, I'm talking 3, 4, 5, 6 times they've been arrested in the last 12 months for stolen cars or guns. And not a damn thing happened to them. Now they're killing somebody.
So do you think bail reform and raise the age has directly impacted that?
Huge. There's absolutely no question about it. Anybody involved in law enforcement will give you the same answer that I'm giving you now. Any politician is going to say, oh, no, it's COVID, it's this. It's bullshit.
COVID. We're going to be talking about that 10 years from now.
It's
bullshit. That's bullshit, right?
Again, there's a multitude of factors, but raise the age, bail reform has absolutely 100% had a huge impact on why we've had 14 murder victims and suspects this year, 13 last year, 13 the year before that.
You know what's crazy about it is, and we got into it, and this is exactly why you and I talked about the podcast, right? We wanted to talk about the things that aren't being talked about, those tangible things that are important in not only communities like ours, but communities across America. We talk about the family dynamic. The family dynamic is so important. And I'm not going to get into this because we're talking about crime, but we're going to talk in another episode about education. So I know it's easy to point the fingers at the teachers sometimes, but when the teachers are coming to the classrooms, they're getting a broken student. And by a broken student, what I mean is they're getting a kid that's been up all night. He's got no supervision. She's got no supervision. They have no food in the cupboards. They're sitting there waking up in the morning, if they wake up in the morning or coming to school late. They don't have an alarm clock. They don't have somebody waking up. They don't have somebody getting them breakfast.
They're taking care of their younger siblings.
Correct. They're babysitting. They're actually being adults at ages 6, 7, 8 years old when they're still babies themselves. This is the uncomfortable conversations that we talked about offline before we started doing this, that we wanted to talk about because family dynamic is a huge factor. And one of the things I want to hone on to, and we talk about things in between breaks and we talk about things throughout our careers. You know, there's a ton of phenomenal, great people. There's a ton of great families that live in these inner cities, even in those areas that we call the gut. Again, we talk about people that come up to you at crime scenes. They're on our side, but it's tough for them to be vocal about it.
Yeah, I tell you, the vast majority of people that I interact with on the streets, and this is at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, are pro-police. They are even more fed up with the state of things right now than we are. Mm-hmm. And, that's what I always tell the cops on the beat is, you are appreciated. These people do need you. They do want you. And, they love having you around. Contrary to, a few of the loudest people that are out there sometimes, the majority of people in the gut, if you will, want the police, love the police, respect the police.
Right. We talk about that all the time. We talk about the silent majority. We talk about the people that, and I understand they choose not to have a voice because there might be retaliation. We understood, and I understood this as a street detective, and no matter where I went, I understood when I had a great eyewitness that said, you know what, Johnny, I saw everything. I don't want to talk. I totally get it. You got a 6, 7, 8-year-old in the house. You don't want to get retaliated against. But what's never lost is that, and I'm not trying to be politically correct because I don't have to be politically correct anymore, but the silent majority really is out there, really supports what every cop and every municipality does. And I think that, this is a total separate episode, but I'm going to touch on it a little bit. But I think what damage the 2020 riots did with the defund the police and the anti-police rhetoric really was coming from a place of people, that majority of them that were protesting didn't even live in these areas that they were saying, hey, let's protect everybody in.
Yeah, 100%. And I remember a press conference that I had to do after the mass shooting on Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really frustrated me that I touched upon in that press conference was some stupid question from one of the reporters. In those protests, we weren't arresting people that lived on Hudson Avenue or on Friedrich Park or on Wilkins Street or on Clinton Avenue. We're arresting people that lived, even outside of Monroe County. And the people that lived in the city, that lived in, some of the high crime neighborhoods were like, what in the hell are these people doing here? Why are they here? This is not what we think. And I don't want to say that I was surprised by it, but
yeah,
it was like, you know what? And I think I said something back then. It's like, what somebody asked, what are these residents telling you? And what they were telling me is they wish that these people would get in the hell out of their city and let us deal with the issues that we have to deal with. We don't need you up there speaking for us because what you're saying is not what we believe.
Yeah, I would second or third what you guys are saying in that I never solved a crime without people in the community helping solve it, whether it was a murder or a drug case. They might not have gone on paper, they might not have signed a depo, they might not have gone to court, but the good people in those areas were always willing to talk on the phone, lay out the groundwork for how things were working on the street, telling us who did crimes. They might not go on paper, but it would be a starting point for us. And those are valuable things. And I think the captain will second that. It's how you solve crimes. And those people are great. And they're the backbone of how the Rochester Police Department does the great things they do, is the information that those citizens provide. Whether it be in court or on a piece of paper or whether it's just a phone call, they are there and they are supporting the police.
Yeah, Frank, I can't tell you how many times I've had dialogue with the men and women of your unit, and I'll say, hey, I just got a call from an informant. An informant said, Jim Smith or so-and-so did this crime, did this murder. I just got a call. And that coupled with information that you had received from other sources corroborated it, but there was nothing really to go on because you didn't have anybody that would go down on what we call go down on paper and give a statement for you.
Yeah, it's frustrating because people, a lot of people say, oh, nobody wants to cooperate with the police because they don't trust the police. You know what? That's horseshit. It really is.
It is horseshit.
That's not why people don't want to cooperate or go down on paper, as we say. The reason 9 out of 10 times we got somebody that's more than willing to call us and provide us information, they're afraid that they're not going to get backed up by the judge or by the court system. They're not going to get
or the politicians who enact this stuff.
Everybody talks about the new discovery laws, and I don't want to get off on a tangent, but it's a lot harder now for us to protect witnesses up until trial date. Their information is getting exposed. We had a case where again, I can't get into specifics, but there's nothing in place in New York State for victims or witnesses. They call it the criminal justice system. It's a perfect terminology for it because name one law that's been passed in the last 5 years that's been for victims or witnesses in the state of New York. I can't think of any.
Zero.
Everything that gets passed is to give the suspect more rights.
Right.
Pro-criminal.
Right. And we sometimes we get over our skis because we've been doing this for a long time. Discovery is basically any paperwork that's generated on a case has to be discoverable to the other side.
Which in theory, that sounds great, right? Yeah. It makes it sound like we're not cheating.
Right.
Nobody wants to cheat, but the problem is, and even the defense attorney, the honest defense attorneys, maybe hard to find them, but even the defense attorneys are like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because what they're asking for has increased the cost to municipalities, whether it be the district attorney's office or the 911 center or the police department. They've increased costs to a ridiculous amount to satisfy the discovery rules.
Right.
And again, just so you don't think that we're a bunch of right-wing nuts here, yes, the defense should have everything that we have to prepare a proper defense for their client. But let's not get crazy and ask for stupid things that the defense really doesn't want or need.
At that point.
And the timeline in which they get it.
Yeah. It's just, it's, again,
well,
it's into the weeds, but it's crazy.
No, I know. We are getting into the weeds a little bit, but, the thing is, just to explain it, so literally we're talking about paperwork that you didn't necessarily have to turn over until a couple hearings down the road, kind of protected a witness.
So put that in again, put that into terms.
Yeah.
Like a couple of hearings down the road might be 6 months down the road.
Sure.
So now how quick does it need to be turned over?
It's like 15 days. And just to give...
Within 2 weeks, you have to have your witnesses are all out there.
Yeah. Yes. And I can't tell you how many times depositions have appeared on Facebook or any of these other...
And we might have 2 hearings and a trial a year down the road that these people are outed.
Right.
Yeah.
Waiting around, sitting in their house, in the gut, waiting for ramifications.
Yeah, when they're trying to help out the police.
Right.
When they're trying to keep their community safe.
Right.
They're getting outed on social media. Pictures of their depositions are being taken and are outed.
So a policy enacted and legislation and put forth
Correct.
has taken the majority, the good citizens of the city of Rochester or these inner city communities, and put them in a difficult spot to benefit someone charged with a violent crime.
Correct.
Makes
Correct.
a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Dumbass.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
So to reiterate, people are not coming forward with information because they don't like or distrust the police. They're doing it because certain people have enacted certain policies that put themselves in danger.
And they're afraid of retaliation.
Yeah.
That's what it ultimately comes down to.
And I will say, just because I want to get rid of all of our witnesses, the amount of retaliation that actually happens as a result of somebody cooperating isn't great. It does not happen a lot at all. Thank God.
Right. And then we talk about that too, right? We talk about people willing to cooperate. Remember the old stop snitching stop signs that were out there years ago, and
bad guys are the first ones to snitch.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
I made a living on that.
yeah, me too. Touche.
The only one not snitching is the good people. The bad guys are snitching left and right.
First one at the table.
Right. I can't tell you how many informants that I had that literally when they walked out in the community, they were the baddest of the bad. They were literally feared by their cohorts. I had a guy buying guns for me one time, literally, and I'm not going to get into war stories, but he was buying guns for me, and the dude selling it to him disassembled the weapon, took the ammo out of the magazine, and said, "Here." And he goes, "What are you doing?" And they're like, "Yeah, we don't trust you having it all assembled." And I mean, that's what a bad dude this guy was that worked for me. And those are the people that we have that are doing the things that may be providing information to us. Thank God for those people too, right? Ultimately, what it comes down to is, and I talk about this a lot, Mrs. Johnson or Mrs. Smith being able to walk to the corner store to get her a gallon of milk.
Johnny, what's one of the best feelings that we used to have back in the day, right? We'd be doing a warrant, and what would we see? The old lady raising the little blinds up and giving us the thumbs up, right?
Yeah.
Because we just boarded up the dope house next to her house.
Right.
That was so gratifying.
Right.
And that's what we have to remember is most people out there are good. They love us. They appreciate us. They need us.
And I'll tell you this right now, and I think that they're still out there.
Oh, yeah.
Those people are still out there. It's just that the less amount, and you got to be careful, right? When I say minority, I'm not talking about any kind of race. The minority, meaning the less amount of people that are out there, are more vocal than the majority. The majority are out there supporting us. The majority are out there giving the silent hand claps and the thank yous. Hey, we need you out there. It's not a pat in our back. It's not that we're sitting here going, "Oh, look how great we are." They've always been there. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, they've been silenced.
Yeah, and they're busy working every day.
Yeah,
right. They
don't
silence
because they're not supported.
Right. Right.
No policies like we talked about. No legislation has been put forth that helps them.
Right.
Everything's been put forth has empowered the criminal element.
Again, I'll challenge anybody. Name one law in the last bunch of years that has been passed to help victims or witnesses.
You can't. It's so great too. You talk about all these laws that come into play. And when we talk about bail reform, and I know we talked about it a bunch of times throughout this pod, but when the powers that be, the positive powers that be, the chiefs and some of the local law enforcement leaders back in 1819, they were warning against bail reform. And I think that the average citizen, this is not a slam on them, the average citizen all across America, where these, either in New York State where bail reform was implemented or in states that have similar policies, they did not understand what the term bail reform meant.
No, not at all. Listen, I've had conversations with some of my neighbors, right? And we just talk about things. And they're like, "Yeah, bail reform, it's a good thing." I go, "What do you think bail reform means?"
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, they think that somebody locked up with a bag of weed, you know, shouldn't be locked up forever. Doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right. When they actually understood what this bail reform did, they're
Right.
like, oh my God, that sucks.
Yeah.
Who in God's name created this thing?
Right.
And it's a result of politicians who have no idea what they're talking about, no idea what the system is, coming up with something that they think people want to hear.
And the worst part is they won't listen to the voice of the people that live in the communities and the cops that are professionals that do it every day, and they won't take that input. No one is saying that there shouldn't be some tweaks to bail reform. I think we would all think there's certain things that can be amended.
Correct.
But it's the guy, we've seen stacks of papers here that are walking around with an illegal handgun
Right.
for multiple times, committing shootings, that is being let out on bail by Judge Lopez, Judge Lee, these, you know, judges that are on the stand that lets everybody out. And that's all done because of these policies.
And nothing ever gets exposed. Nothing ever gets exposed. We lock a guy up, sorry, tapping on the table.
It's okay.
We lock a guy up for a murder. We may or may not be able to talk about the 2 pending gun arrests that he has. If it's a juvenile, forget about it. We really can't discuss it. And we've locked up a ton of juveniles this year, and all of them have a shit ton of prior arrests for guns and stolen cars. I know we mentioned that earlier, but this is stuff that the public doesn't know, but it's real, it's true, and it's adversely affecting our community and every community across this nation.
Yeah.
And if people only knew the truth, and I don't know how to get the truth out to them. They talk
And
about
I don't know if this is
transparency.
out there, but you mentioned on the stolen cars. In your investigations, how prevalent is it that stolen cars are coming up related to
We've had
violent crime, or is it just kids joyriding around in
they're
there?
stealing cars, they're doing shootings, they're doing murders. Again, I'd have to, really look at the numbers, but we've had at least 8, 9, 10 murders this year with stolen cars, and God knows how many shootings we've had in which stolen cars were used. So it's not just kids out joyriding.
Right. We talked about a ton of shit tonight, Cap. We talked a lot of things that may have sounded negative, but it's just the reality of what's going on in America right now.
Yeah, it's like, how do we wrap it up on a positive note? I think there are things for us to look forward to, right? Like I absolutely feel the sentiment is starting to shift back in the right direction. And Dave and I were arguing over the break, which isn't an uncommon thing, but is this a political issue? I'm like, no, it's not politics. It's not about politics. It's not about left. It's not about right. It's about common sense. I mean, we just need to get back to common sense in this community and in this nation. The vast majority of people are in the middle. And what you hear now is you hear your crazy far left liberals and you hear your crazy far right conservatives. That's not where we need to be.
When you talk about common sense, you're talking about, okay, we can't have, and you touched about it, just using an example of one of the topics we talked about was bail reform. So I think us meeting somebody in the middle as cops, maybe we should have had some type of middle of the road. David, you talked about that. A little middle of the road thing with bail reform. Maybe not where it is right now, way out of bounds, but maybe it shouldn't have been, getting locked up for, a week out of disorderly conduct because you couldn't afford a $250 bail, right?
Yeah, that would require actually calling people in during your discussions when you're creating a law to say, hey, what do you think is the right thing to do, or how can we fix this?
That'd be dialogue.
That would be dialogue. And unfortunately, I don't think that happened. I think they listened to some, far left people that really had no knowledge of the system.
Yeah, we heard rumors of how it got passed in the wee hours of the morning, and they just slid into a budget and blah blah blah. But either way, it's having a negative and adverse effect on the community. And like we talked about, regardless of where you live in America, and regardless of where you live in the community, whether it's a suburb or whether it's an inner city or whether it's those gut areas that we discussed, everybody's affected. Everybody's affected by these looser laws that are on the books. And I think it's going to take community people to come together and say, you know what, I'm either going to come to a session, that we have if a politician has an open forum and say, you know what, I disagree with this. I need you to help us help our community change these laws.
Right. And I guess my 2 cents would be, I'm going to speak for the street cops out there and the citizens in the gut, in that if you chase a guy or we arrest a guy with an illegal handgun, or the men and women of the inner city, urban police departments risk their lives to chase a guy with an illegal handgun. That individual should be held in custody. He has an illegal handgun to shoot, kill, maim someone. And it's not a game. It's not a toy. And boys and girls, men and women are putting their lives at risk, chasing these guys in backyards every night. And liberal judges are letting these people out and discounting the sacrifice that these people are making on a daily basis. And I'm never going to sit in front of a microphone and not beat that drum until there's change made. And that's my 2 cents on it. And it'll never stop on that.
I like it.
Yeah, and to expand on that, Dave, it's of course it's the cops, but it's also the next victim that could get hit with a stray round by the guy running in the backyard with the gun.
Absolutely.
And you can't quantify that. We can't put a number on how many murders or shootings have been prevented by making a gun arrest. And somebody's carrying an illegal gun, they're doing it for a reason, at least a cool-off period for guns.
And it used to be, if you caught a guy with an illegal handgun, correct me if I'm wrong, you knew at least the guy, that was one time the guy was going to be locked up.
Who's going to be
You wouldn't see him. Yeah, he was going to be held. You weren't going to see him the next day standing at Jeff and Bartlett with another handgun on him. That wasn't going to happen.
And what we would hear, I'm not doing 5 years because you had Project Exile. You get caught with a gun, you get convicted. It's an automatic 5 years in federal prison. And we would, on the streets, we would hear that. I'm not carrying a gun. I ain't doing 5 years in no federal prison.
We talk about exile. They used to wait a week to review all the cases. Now with this bail reform, they have to do what we call, and we mentioned it last time, real-time exile, where literally as the case, with guys in the interview room being interviewed, and you have the ATF, you have the feds being called, the U.S. attorneys being consulted on whether or not they should hold this guy, write a federal complaint, keep him in custody, and then eventually a complaint gets dropped the next morning, and they take it from the state side and bring it fed.
Listen, the feds are great. ATF is great. We actually have an ATF agent embedded in our homicide unit. He's been there for a couple of years. It's a huge asset to us. But what drives me crazy is the feds are not the be-all, end-all answer to end crime in the city of Rochester or any mid-size or big-size city. If the feds are taking a case, the defendant is a bad dude. He has prior convictions. He's in his mid-20s, 30s, 40s. They will only take certain cases. They're not taking any of these juveniles. They're not taking anybody that doesn't have prior convictions. So by the time it gets to the feds, we've already lost this person.
Yeah.
There is no rehabilitation. There is no anything. So it's a great tool. I love our federal partners. We have awesome relationships here.
Right.
But
it's limited.
It's limited, and they are not the be-all, end-all. Why are we going to the feds to solve our local problems? It's not going to solve our problems.
Well, and I think it goes back to what David's been beating that drum on. I think that the laws need to be either reformed. Like we said, we understand that we might have to meet you middle ground with bail reform. But at the end of the day, the dialogue has to be started. We have to sit down at a table because this is nonsense. What's going on? I mean, look at, and I know we're going off on a tangent, but I mean, you got Walgreens. We've always, since time immemorial, I did all my street time, not all my street time, but when I was a kid over there on Genesee Street, Thurston Road, there was always that pharmacy up on Brooks, right? Whether it was a Rite Aid or a Walgreens. And now because of the crime.
Brooks and Genesee.
Yeah, Brooks, is it Brooks?
Or Brooks and Thurston.
Brooks and Thurston, yeah. So at the end of the day, it's like now the community doesn't have a pharmacy because of these crazy policies that are put into place. And like I said, I know we're going off on a tangent. We went from murders,
and the communities they're trying to help are the communities are the ones that are suffering.
Yeah,
they think they're helping these communities. They need to get their asses out into the community and actually talk to people that live there and see what they want. Don't be making policies from your pedestal that are adversely affecting the people that you're trying to help. That's what drives me nuts.
Yeah.
That's what hits a chord with me, and that's why I always get in trouble.
Look, and I'll tell you right now.
You're never in trouble with me, Cap.
I'll tell you right now.
Thanks.
You could call it like you see it, but at the end of the day, when you have big businesses that have a national footprint leaving your city, at that point, you should probably take a step back and go, something's not going right here.
We all have to be able to admit when we're wrong about something. And I think what we're seeing now is that people are afraid to admit that they made a mistake and that they were wrong.
Right.
And again, I don't want to make this about politics because...
They're waiting for the data.
Right. They're waiting for the data. Well, I'll give you the data. It's just, we need to use common sense. Let's get back to the basics. Let's get back to teaching the kids in school. Let's teach about history, right? We learn so much from history, and that's what I try to tell my daughters, and they ignore me. But whatever you're going through, somebody's gone through it before, and there's no better way to figure out how to navigate the waters than to see how the people before you did it.
Yeah.
And we just need to get back to history and study these problems and how did they get out of it before.
Yeah, and I'm talking about, we talk about the Walgreens and Rite Aid leaving those areas, and I always go back to my Mrs. Johnson theory. We talked about order maintenance crimes and us shagging people off of a corner or dispersing people off a corner that had no right to be there. We know why they're there. They were dealing dope or having guns. And then as soon as they came off, Mrs. Johnson was able to go to the corner store and get her milk. Now we talk about what's going on in America, even in this municipality, where now we have a local big box or whatever you call the Rite Aid or the Walgreens and the national brand. They're not there. Now Mrs. Johnson can't walk to the store.
Now she's getting on a bus.
Now she's got to go and get a bus, or maybe she doesn't have the money to do that, or maybe she's got to get a ride, or maybe she doesn't have the money to do that.
No, and if she's got to walk to the corner store, she's got to get through the 8 to 10 dope dealers that are hanging out in front of the store.
Yeah. These stories and this dialogue that we had, it's almost like this last segment's coming full circle. It's like the fictitious Mrs. Johnson, right? It doesn't have a gender. It doesn't have an age. It doesn't have a race on it. It's about being able to live in a community and feel safe. It's about living in a community and feeling okay with you walking out your front door or your kid walking out a front door and being able to walk and be free wherever you go.
Or sitting in front of your TV and not worried about gunshots flying through your front window. How long did that stuff get not talked about?
And just so people know that we grew up in these neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Like I lived in Augustine Street.
Right.
When I was working Genesee section, my mom lived on Dunbar Street off of Thurston Road. She lived in the 19th Ward when I patrolled the 19th Ward. So we're not talking like we've never been in the city and like we never grew up in the city and we don't know anything about this. That's crap. I know exactly what it was, and I know my mom couldn't leave the house certain times of night to go to the corner store because there were dope dealers hanging out there.
Yeah,
and she knew when they got moved and when they didn't get moved. But now they don't get moved.
But even the dope dealers back then, there was a sense of respect.
Yeah.
Well, how about Sundays, right? Sundays were the easiest day to work, right? Am I wrong? Yeah. The church doors would be open. Yeah. People would be singing. There were no shootings. There was nothing going on a Sunday.
There's just a lack of respect today. Yeah. I mean, we got guys that we locked up years ago. I mean, I remember my daughter was born in the hospital and he's in the room next to me and we're like slapping up because I might have locked him up, but you know what? There was a sense of respect.
Right.
These kids today.
The game's the game. It was
a game. And sometimes you got caught, sometimes they got away.
Big boy hide and seek, we used to call it.
And these kids today, they are playing a real life video game.
Yeah.
The only problem is you can't just hit the reset button in real life.
I always say it, when you add my career, the time I lived in the city with my 30-year career, and it ended up being like 43 years I either lived in the city and worked in the city out of my 53 years on this earth, right? So I know what it's like. I know what goes on in the city. I know how it was, how it used to be. And my father-in-law used to live in the 19th Ward. We just got him out of there before he passed a couple years ago. We all have family that have lived here. We have reasons for being passionate about these conversations. We have reasons to believe that, you know what, man, hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully people are listening. Hopefully people will make a change. You know
I think we all love the city of Rochester. We
Right.
give better part of our lives working for it.
Right.
I think we all want to see the city succeed.
Right.
We all want to see the citizens succeed. Right. I think I
100%. And, you know, my family grew up in the city, you know, on the west side, and it's just heartbreaking to go through those neighborhoods now.
Yeah.
But, you know, to try to wrap it up on a positive note, I hear positive things all the time from these people that live in the gut that we've been calling it. And they're good people and they work hard and they do the best for their family.
Yep.
And, you know, that's what keeps me going every day. And I know that's what pushes a lot of the cops on the beat every day is, you know, these good people. And they just need to, and I know they're used to being silent because they're busy. They're going to work every day, but we need to start hearing their voices. And the people that they're voting for need to start hearing their voices, because the only thing that's going to change policies are the people that make the policies. And, we elect these people that make
Votes
the policies.
matter.
And you need to get up and you need to go vote, whether it's for city council or for your senator or for your congressman. Voter turnout is terrible. Take a break from driving your kids to soccer or find time during the day. You got to get out. You got to start paying attention to who you're voting for. Just because they have a D or an R doesn't mean anything, because there's some very good Democrats out there. There's some very good Republicans out there. Pay attention to the judges that are releasing people that are getting caught shooting an AR-15 in the middle of the street, and those that are setting a respectable amount of bail on them.
Absolutely.
Got to pay attention.
Right. On that note, Captain Frank Umbrino, thank you for being our guest. We appreciate you honoring us with your presence. We appreciate all the work that you and your men and women in your unit have done and do every day. We know that every time your phone rings, and I know the lack of sleep that you guys get, but it doesn't go unnoticed or unappreciated, especially now that I'm on the civilian side.
Best job you ever had.
Yeah, retirement's best job. Captain Frank Umbrino, thank you very much. Stay tuned, folks. We got a lot more. And thank you for listening to the Crime Dawg Podcast. We hope you stick with us for future episodes. But like my brother-in-law, Frankie Grassi, says, if you can't make it, who cares? Ciao.